Aloha, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us for one of our HIF Talk Stories series as part of the 42nd Annual Hawaii International Film Festival presented by Holly Kalani. My name is Anna Page. I'm the Director of Programming at HIF, and I'm really excited to present to you this conversation with James Napier Robertson and Paula Whetu Jones, who are the directors of WHINA, as part of our Film for Thought program in partnership with the Hawaii Council for the Humanities. I'm going to turn over the floor to Danielle Seed, who's going to say a few words about the Hawaii Council for the Humanities. But first, I just wanted to let everyone know that this conversation will be moderated by Ihilani Lasconia, who is a Kanaka Maoli scholar from the University of Hawaii. And we're very grateful to have Ihilani moderating for us today. So without further ado, I'm going to turn over the floor to Danielle Seed.
Thanks so much, Anna. Aloha kako, mahalo to everyone joining us tonight for the second to last of our Film for Thought discussions. There's been such great excitement around WHINA at HIF, and tonight's discussion promises to extend here in Hawaii the excitement for the film and what it represents. My name is Danielle Seed. I'm an assistant professor of English at the University of Hawaii at Manoa, where I teach courses in film, television, and media. And this year I'm working with the Hawaii Council for the Humanities to help coordinate the Film for Thought series. The Hawaii Council for the Humanities has been part of the humanities communities here in Hawaii for the last 50 years. Our kuleana is to support the bountiful connections that have long existed in Hawaii and to foster the possibility of new connections between all kinds of peoples, cultures, and perspectives. This is the 12th year of our Film for Thought series, a collaborative program between HIF and the Hawaii Council for the Humanities that is designed to inspire thought-provoking discourse and community conversations through the medium of film. This year's theme for the Film for Thought series is activism, past and present. Of the 5 films in the series this year, WHINA most emphatically celebrates the legacy of a revered leader, the Indigenous Pacific activist Dame Whina Cooper. In my intro to the Film for Thought booklet, I asked, how does activism change the world? And what role does film play in representing that activism or inspiring or educating new movements? To help answer these questions and more, we are joined tonight by Ihi Lasconia, an activist, hip hop and spoken word artist, and scholar of Indigenous feminisms, who in her companion essay to the film powerfully draws connections between Maori struggles and Indigenous struggles for land and sovereignty across the Pacific. As Ihi writes, in Hawaii, it is because of tupuna like Whina Cooper that we have the privilege of articulating the power of mana wahine, a term Kanaka Maoli have adopted from the Maori to express the strength, fearlessness, and brilliance of a woman. Without further ado, I will now turn it over to Ihi.
All right, mahalo Danielle, mahalo Anna. Okay, I think it's just us on screen, so we're gonna talk story a little bit. For our audience, the way this will go is I'll pose questions for the directors, and I believe if you want, Anna's gonna queue up something for folks who wanna put questions in the chat. That being said, good to go? All right, sounds good, let's do this. And so in the film, we see Whina and the relationship that she has to culture, but also to religion, specifically Catholicism. This duality between culture and religion and navigating that relationship is something so many Pacifica folks find themselves navigating. So as the topic of decolonization is becoming more prevalent, especially in the Pacific, so as the recognition that religion was and is an avenue for colonization. So how do you see these tensions playing out today, and how do you hope to frame this topic in your filmmaking? If you want me to repeat at any time, I know it's a bit of a loaded question. Yeah, how do you navigate these tensions in your filmmaking, and how do you see this playing out a bit more contemporarily?
How do we navigate? How do we navigate the?
Yeah, I guess to frame the question a little bit better is something that you've done really well as directors of the film is highlight the tensions that Whina faced between culture and also religion, with her whakapapa being very staunchly Catholic. So I guess what creative decisions did you make when trying to display those tensions? And how do you see these tensions playing out in everyday contemporary life?
Well, it was part of her life, so we didn't see it as a separate thing. Like, we didn't see it as her being Catholic, her being an activist, her being Māori. It was like our job was to portray her life in the best and most honest and way that we could. So we didn't separate those things out. We didn't think about, her relationship with religion or her relationship with her activism. It wasn't a conscious decision to do each thing. It was just part of who she was, and that was very much part of who she was, and that was what made her such a complex character, because she kept, even though the Catholicism was a thing that she that basically she fought against right from the beginning. Her belief never wavered, and trying to sort of navigate. She was chucked out of her township for 7 years because she broke the rules of her religion. But it didn't make her turn against it. So it's that deeply entrenched, I think. It was who she was. So we didn't really separate that. And as for how it informs our filmmaking now, it depends on what films we're making. I'm doing a lot of historical dramas at the moment that are very heavily steeped in religion, but that's religion and culture running together and sort of intertwining, as it may sort of it's a hard one, because I know what you're saying about sort of trying to decolonize, because religion is so deeply entrenched in Māori culture that it's hard to separate it or know what it was before the missionaries came.
Yeah, I guess Whina was a very devoted Catholic, and her faith was incredibly important to her right to the end. And I think we have to be careful to respect who she was and what mattered to her, and not try and color it too much with what we might wish it was or how we might change things a bit. There were some things that she said that you might sort of disagree with, and she was a sort of very strong-minded person who didn't try to just appease everyone, which is part of what was so amazing about her. But I think her religion was a big part of her life and a big part of who she was, and it was a very important thing to her.
Yeah, being a good Catholic was important, but then being Māori was important too. And a lot of the times they didn't marry up. So there was a lot of conflict within her and within her family and the community, the Catholicism and the culture.
Yeah. And I guess that's part of that was part of her figuring out her journey with these things, was when she would come into conflict and how she would deal with that, with her Catholic faith.
Mahalo. Thank you so much. That was an incredible response. And it's something that a lot of activists, organizers in Hawaii, particularly in the 70s and the 80s, really dealt with too. So we have folks who are really young working on issues such as the bombing of Kaho'olawe in the 70s and the 80s, and we see our kupuna activists trying to navigate both worlds, and it can totally be done. And I think folks like Whina, as well as other organizers who are either indigenous, show examples of that. So I really do appreciate you folks really showcasing her life as it was and not how you wish it could be framed. Appreciate that. With that being said, are you folks okay to move on to the next question?
Absolutely.
Awesome. Thank you. And so across the Pacific, but especially in Hawaii, folks are looking to Aotearoa for methods to normalize their own language in Hawaii, Olelo Hawaii, or the Hawaiian language, within not just our culture, but in broader society. We know that in Aotearoa, there's news and full TV shows in Te Reo Māori. Why do you think Aotearoa has been so successful in integrating Te Reo? And is there any advice that you could give either Hawaiian or other Pacifica film directors who are really looking to make that jump into integrating their own language into filmmaking?
I think it's because of people like WHINA and the activists from the 70s, the 60s and 70s, and our Māori politicians back in the day, and the filmmakers like Mirata Mita and Don Selwyn and Barry Barclay, who were staunch in making sure that the language was represented and heard. And we have the Kohanga Reo movement, which is our language nests. I think that was in maybe the 80s or 90s. I'm sorry, I don't know. But there's still a whole bunch of us. I mean, I don't speak the reo. I don't speak Māori. There's a whole lot of us sort of around my age that we missed that. We missed that movement, and we have to go and learn it as adults now. And there's a lot of people in their 40s and 50s that are just taking a year off work and going to learn Māori because it's taught here for free. Like, you can go and learn it for free. And because we have the news and we have a tikanga, and there's all of these protocols that have to be adhered to. Because maybe I think a lot more people are open to it. Non-Māori are open to wanting to know. And, you know, in our language classes, there's a lot of immigrants that come and learn. And it's very cool. But at the same time, there's still a whole bunch of us that we need to catch up. So we've got a lot of young ones that are slick, and they kind of, you know, they're moving pretty quickly, leaving us behind. But yeah. So I just think it's everybody's, New Zealand's commitment to having the language visible and represented. You know, it's, I think, labelling, there's, you know, on the map, but there's just so much available now. It's there if you need it. You don't have to look too hard.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of immersion schools. There's the university. We've got universities that are Māori universities. Awanuiarangi is one of them. Raukawa. They're just immersion language schools, and high schools and intermediates and primary schools, right through to the early education.
That's incredible. Thank you so much. So I have a tangential question to follow up. As directors of the film, what was it like being able to integrate Te Reo? So there's a couple of scenes where it's just in Te Reo and there's English captions. As directors, what do you think that brought to the film? Because as someone who is not really familiar with Te Reo, but knows Olelo Hawaii, there were a lot of similarities, and I've actually watched the film a couple of times, and even not looking at the captions, there were a couple of familiar words and sentences. Yeah, so what was your decision as directors to integrate Te Reo, and how do you think that shaped the entire film?
Oh, authenticity. You know, I think it's all about authenticity. That was very much, you know, at the forefront of our minds.
That's what they spoke at that time in those situations. So, and we had our language experts with us the whole time. And a lot of our actors could speak Māori, which is very helpful.
But it's a particular dialect from the north as well. So it's, you know, it's sort of, you know, it has to be very carefully done, and it's sort of all the kind of translations that have to be gone between to sort of make the wording accurate in different, you know, in many different ways. So yeah.
And the language is a lot more poetic. I think Māori is a lot more poetic. But we had a lot of Finna's family on set working behind the scenes. They were on screen. So we had, there's a certain level that we had to maintain. We would have anyway, but having them there just raised it up a little bit more.
The mantra was just, what is the right way to do this every step of the way? What's the right way? And how do we do that?
And the family were over this, everything from the scripts, right from the scripts. Like, it wasn't just like, we'll bring them on when we're filming. Right throughout the whole process, the family were involved. Her son and daughter, Finna's son and daughter, and granddaughter.
Yeah, and there's a cool moment that we've got in the film where there's this iconic photo of Finna with her granddaughter, Irene Cooper, and then, of course, we had asked Irene to be part of it, and Irene is an executive producer in the film, and then we put her in the film, and then there's a great shot where she's standing there, and the shot starts on the little girl who's playing her in the film at the beginning of the march, and then the real Irene is standing there with her hands on her shoulders and behind her, and the camera tilts up, and it's the real Irene. And so it's sort of stuff that people wouldn't know if they don't, know the real inside sort of aspect of the story, but it feels important for the film.
That's amazing. I didn't know how closely you folks work with the family, and I think
they're all in it throughout.
Yeah, grandchildren, great grandchildren, cousins, aunties, uncles. They all, most of the front line of the march are all Finna's family.
Yeah.
That's fantastic. There've been a good amount of biopics or like life films where the family isn't even contacted until it's released, and right now it's like missing me. There was a documentary about someone, I think it was, I don't know if it was Selena, this Spanish singer, but yeah, the family was really upset because no one even contacted them. But very, very happy and stoked to hear that not just one or two members, but the entire family was there along with you folks. James, you said something that was a bit interesting to me, and it's if you didn't know about that scene in the march, then you wouldn't have been able to identify it. Are there any other scenes within the movie that are kind of similar to that, where folks weren't familiar with the dynamics outside of what they're seeing on the screen? They wouldn't have seen the connections. That might have been a little wordy, so I can rephrase. But were there any other moments in the film where either family members were involved, or you decided to put things in intentionally, where folks who really understood the family or the story would pick up on that?
Yeah, there's a lot of that throughout the film. We'd probably have to just sit here and think about.
Yeah, the church where she says, "My father built this church," when she's having the fight with that he did build that church. Finna's, that is the original church
that we were shooting.
That we were shooting in. So Finna's real dad built that church. We filmed a lot up north where Finna is from, in Pangaru. A lot of the clothes were Finna's. The jewellery were actual Finna's. The feather cloak that Rena wears is Finna Cooper's real cloak. Cyril Chapman. There are people that were in the first march that were in the march that we had.
And then of course, we also wanted and tried to sort of intercut real footage of the march, the documentary that was made about the march, into the film. And another kind of wonderful little connection is that our director of photography, Leon Nabi, who's sort of a New Zealand legend, he was actually the cameraman that shot the march. So it was he was young, and he went with the march, and it's his footage that he shot when he was of the actual, that we then work into the film itself. So it's kind of, so Leon was at the beginning and there at the end of the march, depiction. And so, and that's why in the end it was a really great thing we were originally going to shoot them arriving in Wellington at Parliament and speech and all that sort of stuff. But in the end, it's so much more powerful just having the actual footage at that point, and the kind of film handing over to the real sort of the doco footage, and it sort of felt dramatically that it worked. And then we come back to sort of WHINA, our kind of movie finna, for that sort of final scene. Also, like the po whenua, you know, that was carved by the same guy that carved the original po whenua.
The weather too up north is notorious, but we managed to film everything we needed to film. And the minute we yelled cut, we called cut, it started pouring and it flooded, and we had to get out of there before we couldn't. So like the weather was insane.
Yeah.
You know, there's a lot of little things like that right through that people would come up and say, well, I did this and this is where I was, and the support that we had from people that really believed in us and the story was amazing.
I think sometimes there can be a thing as well where if you know, again, the most basic guiding star is like, what is the right thing to do? What is the right way to do this, right way to make it? What is the right, you know, and it seems like then if you can kind of like stay on that path enough, things do start to align, and then you'll have funny moments that you'll read into way too much. Like on our first day of pre-production, I took a photo, a rainbow came out over the top of the production office, and I was like, it's a sign. And then as Paula says, the weather was very kind to us in all sorts of ways throughout, and you know, so
and a lot of the actors whakapapa to up north, so you know, there are a lot of people connected genealogically to WHINA, so and her tribe up there. No, it was kind of more like the rainbow was throughout the whole thing.
That's so beautiful. Mahalo for sharing that with us. I love the process. It kind of reminds me of there was a film a couple of years ago in HIF, Hawaiian Soul, and it was about this kupuna, George Jarrett Helm, who on Ko'olave and passed away. But during the making of the film, some of his family members, like great nieces and nephews, actually played characters in the film. So very cool. We have a question in the chat from East Films, and I believe that there were 3 actresses who played Whina in different aspects of her life. But did the 2 actresses who played Whina workshop together?
No.
well, yeah, a bit. I mean, it's like they had to kind of both try and capture the same person. You know, of course, older Whina, who Rena is playing, we had a lot more footage of her and a lot more kind of to work with of exactly how she sounded and the way she moved and all her kind of, you know, characteristics in that sense. With younger Whina, who Miriam McDowell's playing, it was a lot. There wasn't much. There was like photos and the odd thing, but there was a little more kind of interpretive work of, you know. But in a way, it was about where Whina starts and where, you know, sort of the handover point in a way of when Miriama, in a sense, becomes Rena as their version of Whina. So in the final scenes with Miriama, when she's, you know, being fired by the Māori Women's Welfare League, that's like where she's very much getting very close in her physicality and her kind of pacing of speech and cadence and all these things, sort of getting very close to then where Rena sort of picks up and goes from. And then, of course, that's intercut throughout the film. So you kind of, it's not in a linear fashion that they go from one to the other. But, you know, they definitely, there was a lot of thought and work that had to go into how they would work, how they would feel next to each other in a sense, and that they would feel like the same person at different points in her life.
Did they workshop together though? I can't actually remember where they actually workshopped together, but they had access to the same research.
We had a couple of rehearsals with them where we had them in the room together, and it was like about that of starting to kind of, you know, find, you know, and then it was very much like in their own sort of path. But so they're aware of what each other is doing, and
And Miriam basically had to work backwards, because James is right in saying that there's no actual footage of Whina when she was younger. So Miriam just had to, see the older footage of Whina and kind of work backwards as to what she would have been like, not as an 80-year-old woman.
I think as well, then if it's done right, and it feels like, again, we've taken each step with the focus on A, what is the right way of doing it, B, what's authentic. Something really fascinating can happen where in the end, with some of the scenes with Miriama when she's, younger Whina, like when she's quite young, Irene Cooper was then saying how it was amazing seeing what her grandmother was like when she was younger, because she'd never seen that before, you know, and thankfully the process that had gone into trying to imagine and recreate her felt truthful enough that for her own whānau, it's actually as if there she is now. We get to meet her in that sense, rather than feeling like it's some, false movie version that's not really her, So.
And Miriam spent a bit of time, well, they both did, with Hene Rangi Cooper, who's Whina's daughter. So heavy research that the two actresses did, going but spending time with the family, getting a sense of the person that Whina was. And we would have been told pretty quickly if they'd got it wrong. Yeah, we're on the phone because they've got direct dial to both of us, and but just the care and patience that both actresses took with the family was to their credit. And obviously it shows in their performances.
That's incredibly powerful. I love how much due diligence was done. The acting was incredible. There wasn't a dry eye in the movie theater when I got a chance to watch it in person. And also congratulations on winning the first Pacifica Award for HIF.
Yeah, I didn't know that.
We didn't know that.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Amazing. Okay, we're gonna move on to the next question from Panther Claw 213. How long did it take to finalize the screenplay? I am sure you made some tough decisions because her life was so incredible.
Yeah, 100%, absolutely.
Yeah.
We when we kind of when Paula and I started on it in earnest, we had a script that had been started by a writer, James Lucas, and he'd sort of got it to a point, and then we sort of took it, and I think again it was that thing of firstly just constantly trying to think what really happened here, how would this have happened, what's sort of feels and how can we capture her. It absolutely, there was, I think there was a list of all the things that she'd done in her life, and 80% of it you can't fit into the movie because it's 2 hours long, and so we would always joke that the mini series will have to capture all of that. But it was it was just a process of going through each.
I think James and I just kind of looked at those big turning points in her life and had to sort of nail down the ones that shifted her. Because she did so much. Like both of us were in awe of Whina, her life, because I didn't know very much about her until I started, doing the research. But she, it was just the big things that shifted her and the big things that caused her to go in a different direction. Of course, William and her children. It was important to have her children feature in it because of the fact that a lot of biopics, especially with women, don't have the children in it, and she had 5 of them. So it was important for us that they were also a part of, and the reasons for her decision making sometimes.
And it's also really important, it was really important to figure out what is the story that we are telling, in the sense of, it's a very classic biopic kind of structure, but because, well, certainly in New Zealand, everyone, or most people would know Whina when she led the Land March, and there's this very iconic image of her at that point, at 79, 80 years old. But what the film really then became a key part of the storytelling in the film was what made her that. Well, how did she end up as that person? And as Paula said, what were the kind of key moments and events in her life that one way or another, through hope or tragedy, ultimately ended up with this, like, you know, little old woman that could lead a march across the country and inspire thousands, you know, which is a pretty rare thing for someone to be able to do. So how does that person, where does that come from? What creates that person? And that was the kind of framework within how to figure out what parts of her life we had to include, and what parts that, even if we would love to include them, ultimately that'll have to be for a longer version of the story.
Yeah, and we've had a lot of people say to us that, you know, we didn't know anything about her, and we're wanting to know more. And we have no doubt that it'll be part of our school curriculum very soon. Just people don't know, and people have also said to us that we're questioning what we're doing for, you know, with our lives when we watch this 80-year-old who did what she did throughout her whole life. You know, she was always fighting for something or another. So yeah, she's an important.
Yeah, and also, again, it was really important for us to not try and turn her into a saint or something that's just unrealistic, or some kind of, like, you know, WHINA was like every human being had her flaws. She had her contradictions, and if the film didn't feel like it showed those in an honest way, then no one would believe anything great about her either. It's sort of, and the fact that she had conflict and was part of creating conflict, and also had conflict coming at her from all aspects. You know, she had her conflict with the Catholic Church. She had her conflict within Māori, within her own town, Pangaru, that she got run out of, and within her own whānau, with her brother, with, like, you know, it's like it's that conflict that she went through was on many different levels, and, you know, that needed to be shown as, you know, as much as we could within the time that we had.
Mahalo. And it takes an incredible amount of humility to be able to tell this kind of story. So I know that it's not just me, but on behalf of everyone who watched it, thank you so much for the integrity that you had with her life and with this film. And, like, I'm not trying to, like, gas you up too much, but I think this is one of, like, the best films ever. And I think what made me feel so connected to it was that she wasn't painted as a saint. And it's so easy to make a biopic that idolizes either an activist or a hero or a celebrity. And yeah, I really appreciate the angle in which you folks have taken the film. And I hope you feel very rewarded, because I know a lot of people resonated with it. And it's absolutely okay for people to be flawed. And I think that's what made the film so interesting to so many folks. Rena Owen was in the crowd when I went to a film screening here. And she said after doing her research on WHINA, she wasn't too sure if she would be friends with her or have liked her. And I thought that was really funny, but I appreciate how true it was. And I really
that's it's I think it's something that has to be really embraced and encouraged in depicting someone, is to not try and just have completely rose-tinted glasses and you know, in the end that's less inspiring, it's less relatable, it won't be as helpful for people. And I think I remember that moment when Rena was suddenly a little you know, she'd done a lot of reading, and of course the thing is as well to remember is that we of course did a lot of reading and a lot of studying and a lot of research and a lot of talking with whānau and all the things we could do to try and do it right. But you have to also remember that all of that is coming through a certain lens. That's how this person remembered it, or that's how this book's depicting it. And so that, I think for Rena, there was a moment where she'd been doing research and she was, you know, like a bit sort of like you know, figuring out how to deal with that in a way because of the fact that Whina was a controversial figure. But that was, again, that conversation that we had to have with Renner of like, it's about, that's part of what makes her incredible, is the fact that like she's a human being that is living on a bigger kind of spectrum than most people do, and everything is kind of like, you know, everything is, it's like larger than life almost. It's like a movie, you know, where it's like big things are happening, and with someone like her, she's, you know, it's just so important that we show that she could make mistakes as much as she could change the future.
And I think that's why she's relatable. Like, you guys all have your Hawaiian nannies and koros. You'll know people like Whina. You know, people will be able to relate to it. And it's interesting how many people were moved to sort of tell their stories at the end, because we did a few Q&As after some of the film showings here, and just people that wanted to get up and talk about their people or their memories of Whina, or where they were at this time, and how sort of honoured they were to meet her, and happy they were that we had put her on the big screen. But those, you know, the nannies, the grandparents, that was what our grandparents went through, that time period. So it's not like, you know, way back when. We know that our grandparents were going through this, you know.
Yeah, and like, it's also, you know, about us trying to capture, again, in the film, just trying to think about what message she would want out of it. Like, what film would she be happy with? And I think that's where, you know, Whina she fought the government, she fought all sorts of different, you know, bodies, and she fought for Māori land rights, and she fought for women's rights. But then another thing she also cared about was bringing everyone together. So she was a very, like, it was really important to her that the end goal, the end game for Aotearoa was people to come together, not continual fighting, not continual sort of divided anger. She was trying to sort of, and that, even that in some ways, for some people, was a controversial stance. You know, like, it's amazing how that something like that could be controversial, but it was, and for her, and so that was still in the end what the film had to try and capture was, you know, that the spirit of that, of ultimately, you know, people, you know, being alongside each other, and being, and being, you know, nice to each other.
Yeah.
Something that Rena said during the Q&A portion of the film is, well, she was a trailblazer, so of course she was going to burn people on her way. And I just thought that was funny. Yeah, thank you for sharing. We have one other question from Giancarlo Minga. What's next for Whina after HIF?
I think it, you know, it'll keep it sort of, for films like Whina, which, you know, it'll travel around in different festivals, and then it'll come out in, you know, different countries at staggered times. It's already come out in theatres in New Zealand, and so and
it's in Australian theatres too now, in November. So
yeah, so it's sort of
we want to get it into schools here.
Yeah.
We've had a few school groups watch it, and they're very funny. Miriama McDowell, who plays Middle Whina, she recorded some of the reactions of some of the kids. She had a school group. She was in the audience, and it was very funny. They laughed at the right moments. They were shocked when she announced that she was pregnant to William, and you know, it was very good. So kids can relate to this as well.
Yeah.
Awesome. That's exciting. Definitely think it should be brought into schools. It's such a compelling film. I wanted to go back to another question that I had that was pre-prepared. And I was looking at Whina and the other places that this film was talked about. So on New Zealand or NZ On Screen, Iwi Whitiahua, there's a pioneering women collection that they have. on their site, and this film, your film Finna, is indexed under this collection that celebrates women and feminism in New Zealand. And throughout the film, we never hear the word feminism or feminist. Without a doubt, after watching the film, it's a story about a WHINA addressing patriarchy and challenging the nuclear family. And so, did Pacific feminisms or Native feminisms in any way influence your direction of storytelling at all? And would you consider this a feminist film? I talked with a few people who watched it, and a lot of people said this would definitely be a feminist film. I wouldn't even know how Finna Cooper would even like talk about this film or even identify as a feminist, since that wasn't really something that was common at that time. But yeah, so I can like reiterate. So did Pacific/Native feminisms influence your direction of storytelling? And would you consider this a feminist film? And for folks who believe that this is a feminist film, how would you work through that concept with them, if you agree or disagree?
James, is this a feminist film? See, again, we it's very hard to slice it up like that, because the way that we looked at her and her life, it's quite holistic. And feminist film, Māori culture isn't patriarchal. It wasn't. That's how she became the chief of her tribe. And there were female chieftainesses back in the day. There were female warriors.
But women can speak on the marae.
See, women can't speak on the marae up there, but they can speak on the marae on the East Coast. So it's there's tribal differences. But yeah, feminist. I mean, she's firmly believed that woman, as and with her speech, right, needed to learn how to cook, look after the house, and look after the children, get back to basics, kind of thing. So I don't know. I can't. It's a hard one, because she is, but she's not. Like,
yeah,
of the time.
I think that's almost like in an odd way, not really up to us to decide. I think in a way, again, the like overarching guiding light for us was just trying to capture the film as honestly about her, and not and sort of try to remove any kind of what we might want or whatever out of her or her story, and just instead sort of like who was she. And so in a way she might fit in some ways a certain thing, but not fit in other ways. And but we could have, it's so easy with a film, if you, especially with a real person, if you didn't like something about them, you just leave it out, and then that stops existing about them. In a way, the movie becomes the version of them that is, but that's a dangerous thing to do in a way, because then you're kind of changing who they are, as opposed to trying to just honor who they were and who they wanted to be, and how they would feel about that.
Yeah, I'm guessing feminism might look different in the 50s than it does now. But yeah, totally agree with James. I mean, she was brought up she knew what the rules were, but it didn't matter if they didn't make sense, or she sort of did what she wanted.
She fought ferociously for women's rights.
Yeah.
Yeah. She for women Māori women to speak on marae or meeting house up north. Part of forming the Māori Women's Welfare League, being the formation of that. There's like incredible things she did. So I think it's really there's but yeah, I think each person would just have to interpret the film in the way that feels honest to them.
Yeah.
Beautifully said. Thank you so much. And I think there's something maybe not necessarily inherently feminist, but when applying a feminist analysis to your film, bringing up maybe the flawed aspects of Finna is something that feminism and feminist theory hopes to do. It's this humanizing aspect of women, to not be seen as one-dimensional people or characters who just have a responsibility to family or like vanity, but yeah, someone as a whole. flaws and all. Thank you so much for answering that. I know it was a very like pressing question for many folks who saw the film. And it's going back like to Hawaii, one of our most beloved activists and scholars, Kumuhanani K. Trask, once identified as a feminist in her early activism and work, and then later disavowed that term, or like claiming to be a feminist, because she considered the identity or being like called a feminist didn't do the work that she wanted it to do for her lovely or for her nation. So it's very, very interesting to see how feminism plays out in Hawaii in Pacific in comparison to the West, specifically in America and American filmmaking, where any film like about a woman is a feminist film, quote unquote, even though it can be incredibly misogynistic. Yes, thank you so much. Going back, there was a previous question from the audience that talked about different actresses working together and maybe them workshopping or not. I was wondering if you folks could talk about your process as directors. So what did that process look like for you folks? When did you begin working together? Were there certain aspects of the film that you worked on separately? How do you think your relationship professionally really worked to create the entire film from start to finish?
For me, I knew James's work, and I just totally respected him as a filmmaker. We didn't know each other, and we kind of got given this script, and it's never really been. We just did. We just like, yeah. It's well, we didn't really have a process. Like, it wasn't really something that we sat down and split up. It's just like we were on set together the whole time. James is was more technical. He's done more than I have, so I mean, I recognise that. And we talked, we communicated a lot, and we didn't do anything separate. Like, even this is, I rang him up and said, James, should we do this together? I'll come over to your house. And he's like, yeah, okay.
I came out of the shadows.
Yeah, came out of the shadows to do this. You're very lucky, because he's been AWOL for a while, just doing his other film. But yeah, no, it just seemed to work. I think respect and.
Yeah, I think if you like someone and they're a good person, then you'll find a way. There won't be any particular clear path that's like, or clear delineation. You know, it's a constantly evolving thing. But if sitting underneath it is a sense of, you know, integrity and good people, and the like desire for like us to finish it and not hate each other, you know, like we have to be friends at the end.
Yeah.
And we'll find a way, and each day, I mean, the nature of filmmaking is so chaotic. It's so unpredictable. You could never plan for what's going to come at you. You will never, ever know. Whatever you plan for, there'll be some new twist. Something will happen.
Yeah.
And so I think there has to just be a spirit of, we'll find a way. And if you're working with people that you respect and, you know, get along with really well and have great affection for, then you find that way together, and there's always a way in the end.
Yeah, and our team were amazing. Like, they just 150% all the time. And yeah, it's just allowing people to be themselves as well. Like, James doesn't have an ego. I don't have an ego. We kind of just want to do the work in the best way that we possibly can, and honour WHINA and honour her family and honour all the people that helped us. And I think we did that, and we did it well. And we're very happy with the outcome. And we still like everybody, which is awesome.
And amazingly, everyone seems to still like us. So,
yeah.
You know, something went right. It's also just constantly talking, constantly making sure you're making the same thing. You have the same, you know, again, that guiding light, that star that you're following, it has to be the same one. If you were wanting to do something different, then it wouldn't work. And I think it was also for Paula and I, we started on the script. And we had a great period of weeks just shaping the script as to, you know, the story it should be. And that's really that was like the foundation in going into making the film.
Yeah.
Mahalo nui. Oh, hey, Anna.
Oh, hi, everyone. On that note, we're actually running out of time for our conversation this evening. But I want to extend a huge mahalo to Ihilani Laskonia for moderating our conversation today, and of course to Paula and James for joining us for this conversation. A huge mahalo to you both. It's been a wonderful conversation, and for all of those that are watching at home, this will be up on our Facebook and our YouTube channel, so feel free to share with your friends and family. And also, we will have one final conversation tomorrow as part of our Film for Thought conversation at 10 a.m. Hawaii time for the film Midwives. I just want to extend another special mahalo to Danielle Seed for coordinating our program this year, and to the Hawaii Council for the Humanities as our program partner. So just another big mahalo to everybody for participating today. Thank you all.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you, thank you.
For our award, I must suss that out.
What was that?
Yes.
WHINA.
Yes. Congratulations on the Pacifica Award as well. All right, aloha everyone. Thank you so much.
Well done. Thank you. Bye.